All right. Well, I'm recording now. Welcome to WhoScape. My name is Alexandros, and I'm here tonight with Cody and Jerry Hawthorne, currently of Plaid Hat Games. But Jerry was one of the designers for Heroscape during its original run. Um, you, that's actually a great question to start with. I know we're jumping right into it, but when exactly did you end up joining the Heroscape design team?
Well, first of all, hello everybody. uh, yeah, I joined up with Heroscape back in late 2004, um, and really started to get to work in early 2005.
So, what other was that your first like really real design experience going into Heroscape? Were there other games you worked on before then, or
Up to that point, I was just a hobbyist, and throughout my whole life, I've always tinkered with games. When I was a kid, we used to play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and I was always the game master, so I was always having to come up with all these adventures and things like that. And then I got into science fiction, and I designed a science fiction version of Dungeons and Dragons for me and my friends to play with space travel and all that stuff. And that's what we played together with me and my friends. We played my space version of Dungeons and Dragons, and then they came out with Star Frontiers or something like that, and they finally started supporting RPG games in the science fiction sphere, and I got into those as well. So, uh, but anyways, uh, later on in life, I always was just tinkering with games. Anytime I had a game, I would always mess around with it. I got all into Warhammer and miniature games and stuff like that, and that was what I was really into. Necromunda and these miniature skirmish games through the Games Workshop, and that's what I was into when I discovered Heroscape.
so did you specifically gravitate more towards the skirmish titles than the full wargame titles? Like I heard you mention Necromunda. Were you not so much like Warhammer Fantasy or 40K then?
I played 40K and fantasy, but I really, really, really loved Necromunda because of the way that it created sort of a legacy with your characters and stuff. You named them, and you had a little gang, and you got to see them get better or get worse sometimes because some of them would get injured and stuff like that. And I got into Blood Bowl and little games like that, which I thought were really, really, really special. And then I was recently married, and my wife was pregnant with our second child, and I found out that we were having a boy, and so I was thrilled. And I kind of wanted to like recreate my own childhood, and I started getting out on the internet and looking at eBay and trying to find the old toys and games that I liked when I was a kid. And one of the things I really liked when I was young was a game called Hero Quest. And when I was surfing around looking at the New York City Toy Fair images that were on the internet. This is before social media or anything. I was looking at the New York City Toy Fair images on the internet from February of 2004. And I saw this game with all these plastic hexes that linked together. And I don't know if any of you guys remember the very first time you set eyes on Heroscape, but it is it's quite something because there's nothing else like it. And it had all the toy aspects and all the building toy aspects. And then in these images, they were using Hero Quest figures. And so I immediately got interested because, again, I wanted to recreate my childhood for my own child. And I started looking at those images and stuff and digging in a little bit deeper. And I found out that one of the co-designers, or one of the co-inventors, is more better term, of Heroscape was actually Stephen Baker, who was the inventor of Hero Quest. So I was
Yeah.
immediately attracted to this whole idea that I was going to buy Heroscape as soon as it came out, and then when my son was old enough to play it with me, I would have it there, and I would bust it out, and I would earn those huge dad points.
So that's actually, I don't want to dive too far into this topic, but I am curious. How old were you when you got into Hero Quest the first time?
Oh, I was an adult. I was like
Oh,
in
okay.
my I was a full blown adult. But what's cool about it is that when I was into Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff and everything, Well, I left and I joined the military, and I spent 4 years in the military. And I just, I didn't play any games, or I wasn't involved with anything involving hobbies at all. I was just involved in the military. When I got out of the military, I had this little friends group, and none of them were into games at all, much less RPGs. So I discovered HeroQuest, and it was a board game that allowed me to have all the fun of an RPG, but it allowed them to play a game that was like a board game for them. And for me, I was recreating my own childhood. So when I say, HeroQuest, what I really mean is when I was a young adult in my early 20s, I discovered HeroQuest, and it was like this crack for me, because it was just like the experiences I'd had when I was a young kid coming up with D&D adventures.
There's really something so magical about that game. I see the cover art and I get transported. I mean, I was 6 years old when I found that game. I got it at the yard sale, and I don't even know that it was complete. Like, I don't know if I would have had any way of knowing that. But I remember like pouring through the books and looking at all the miniatures. And I never actually played it. It wasn't until like 6 weeks ago I finally gave up and bought the 2021 version. So it's just funny that
Hell yeah.
We've gotten to talk about it, because I've been painting my set in my spare time.
Well, it's cool because it's so incredibly linked with HeroScape. You can't separate the two. They're so linked that you could literally play that they are almost cross compatible, literally.
Yeah, I've even heard some comments that, like, I heard a comment about the new expansion. That's not really new, right? It's like a remaster almost of Against the Ogre Horde. But I heard some HeroQuest fans saying like, "Oh, it's just like it's just like they took the combat rules from HeroScape." And it's like, well, I don't know that that's fair, because it's if you know the history, well, it's so interconnected. But I think I've seen those Toy Fair images as recently as a couple years ago, where you can see the HeroQuest miniatures repurposed.
Yeah. So the exact images I'm talking about when I reference those.
I think so.
Those are
Those
are the ones that reeled me in. They had like a little, the little skeletons and stuff from, and we never actually did get skeletons, in all those years of just the regular HeroScape run. We never really got our skeleton army, but it would have been pretty cool.
There's some in the VC world, but I've also seen a couple Renegade staff
talk about
throw that word out there a couple times. Yeah, I've seen it. The people definitely want it. That's for sure.
I think it would definitely be a wonderful thing to have. I would love to see what they did with that, and I'm sure that the creatives that are involved could come up with all kinds of cool ways to play around with those units and everything.
Before we move on, I wanted to just say how interesting. We were talking before we started about the how old me and Lex are, and we were both 8 and 9. When in 2004 when the run started, and you describing seeing HeroScape for the first time kind of brought me back to seeing it on the shelf in Walmart in 2004. I believe was when I got my first Rise of the Valkyrie, and me and my brother got it as like a joint birthday present. But it's really interesting to hear from the perspective of someone that was an adult at the time frame, and seeing how through a kid's eyes and an adult's eyes, they're both equally excited about the same thing. And that's
cool. It was transcendent. And even from my eyes, having, been exposed to hobby gaming and stuff like that, I recognized the quality in the HeroScape's original offering, the sparkly water and all that stuff. In fact, I was so blown away. Like what happened is when I saw those images at New York City Toy Fair, I was so captivated by this that I had to have that game. It was like the top of my agenda. And what I did is I would do we didn't have Google back then, but I would do an internet search, Jeeves or somebody like that. I don't know. I would do like an internet search like every week for HeroScape, and nothing would come up. And one day I did a search for HeroScape, and a website popped up called Heroscape.net. And what it was is it was a website that was run by a good friend of Craig Van Ness and Rob Davio, and he was kind of sort of practicing his web design skills, and he was wanting to support their effort. And they had a feeling that this is going to be a big product for Hasbro. And so he got out ahead of the curve, and he created a fan website. And back then, like I said, we didn't have any social media. So every website had its own little community forum. And I joined up with that community forum, and there was only like 4 of us, I think, right? Maybe 5. But one of them was Rob Davio, and one of them was Craig Van Ness, and one of them was Hero, the guy that ran the website. And then there was a guy named CBS42, and then there was me. So it was like, what, 5?
Yeah.
And so there was like 5 of us on there. And I was vocal on their little web forum about my interest in the game and the reasons why I had an interest in the game. And I expressed my excitement about it. And Craig reached out to me and he was like, well, as soon as you get the game, let me know how you like it, And so when I went to Walmart and I got that game for the very first time, and I came home and I opened up that package and I saw everything in there, I literally could not believe that I got that game for $40. I mean, at the time, that was a bargain, right? For all the stuff you're getting. And I just couldn't believe it. I started looking at the rule book, and I said, fully illustrated color rule book. A lot of times back then, rule books were literally still just black and white back then.
Right.
And so, or just, monotone. They didn't have a lot of colored images and stuff. And I was just, the quality just oozed out of that thing. There had never been, in my experiences, there had never been anything like it. And so I couldn't believe that I could buy that at Walmart, and it could cost me like $40 to buy that at Walmart. And so I immediately bought 2 more copies for my nephews. That's why everybody bought so many copies. We all knew it was a huge value. And but I got on and I took pictures, and I got on and I talked about on that little stupid forum where there was just like a handful of us. I got on there and I started just raving about what I had just come home from Walmart with. I just was raving about it. And then I mentioned that I wanted to play this with my nephews. And Craig contacted me and he said, do me a favor. Here's my email. Do me a favor. When you play it for the first time with your nephews, because, the game is all about father-son gaming. Craig was all into father-son gaming. He said, just drop me an email. Let me know be honest with me. Let me know what their reactions are and everything. And so what I did is I played it with my nephews and my brother and my nephews, and we played it all day long. We played it so many times, and it was a memory maker for me. It's like an indelible, on my memories. It's an indelible thing. And I typed out this big long email expressing all of my experiences and all of their reactions. And then he immediately invited me to become a playtester. And I was one of the first outside playtesters that was actually involved in the whole process. And this is when Wave 1 had already been designed and internally playtested. And I didn't really get much playtesting on Wave 1 in the sense that any of my feedback would have made any difference. But I did get to playtest it before it was released. So I was able to make, my own home. I was already a hobbyist, so I knew how to paint miniatures and stuff. And I made my own little homebrew versions of the Wave 1 miniatures and stuff, and printed off the stats and stuff, and just started playtesting the stuff with my nephews, and we're having a ball. But then once after Wave 1 was released, and when it was about to release, I actually put together the very first Heroscape tournament in Dallas, Texas. We had it at an old movie theater that had been like an ancient movie theater that had been closed down and been turned into something else, and you could rent it out. And we rented it out, and I used Wave 1, just like a couple of advanced copies of the Wave 1 units Craig sent me, and I was able to give these away as prizes.
Oh wow!
And it was a huge deal because everybody was salivating over those, And I didn't even get them. I didn't even get Wave 1 until long after that. But the guys who won the little tournament got those prizes and stuff, and it was pretty cool.
And were they literally just advanced? Oh, sorry.
I know I'm rambling, but after that, I was fully involved in Heroscape and all waves after that for the whole time, for its whole run, basically.
And so you say fully involved. Something I have kind of noticed is speaking with people, because I kind of asked around a little bit, what questions would you like to see asked? I don't think a lot of people kind of know exactly what your involvement was, at least the newcomers. Like, could you explain kind of what the scope of that was with your work with Heroscape?
Sure. I will explain it in very easy terms. Number one, Hasbro, specifically Craig Van Ness and Rob Davio and Hasbro, were very supportive of the fan effort to create a community around the game. And I was one of the community organizers at Heroscape.net, and then all of our other incarnations, including Heroscapers.
Add him to your prayer list.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. You're kind of a quiet voice there. What was that?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't say anything.
Okay, I thought I heard somebody's voice. So I was involved in community organization. I was also in charge of the very first sets of Gen Con tournaments and initiating sort of a nationwide structure that involved competitive play. And they sent me some of the software that was used by Wizards of the Coast at the time for running whatever stuff. I think Magic the Gathering, maybe, I don't know.
Sure.
But they sent me the software so that I could run Heroscape tournaments. So I got involved in trying to, formulate some sort of competitive structure around Heroscape. And then I was also asked to, in addition to play testing and stuff like that, I was also asked to design units. Now, when I say design units, I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm going to come up with this cool, Kyrie Warrior or whatever. Whoever was behind the scenes creating these units, they would come up with the idea for the unit, and then they would say, here we need this. I'll use like the ogre, the Garioni, the ogre with one eye, the Cyclops ogre. So they would give us the name and say it's a big ogre, and it's going to be on a large base, and then so it would be our job. We would be assigned units. It would be our job to come up with the abilities for that unit, to play test those units for balance, to stress test those units in the greater competitive scheme of things, and then present that to the actual designers and stuff like that. And then they would run it through their internal channels. They would run it through legal to make sure that we weren't, doing anything that would be, because Hasbro's it's a family game company.
Sure.
And so they would do everything on their end. And so that was how units were created. So when I was a content creator or, an inventor for that sort of stuff back then, that's basically what I did, creating abilities for units that were already ready to be, that they already were in production. They already had the sculpts ready to go and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. So 2 follow-ups here. First off, you mentioned that they kind of had, they wanted to check to make sure everything was okay with, everything was in line with Hasbro's family-friendly image, that they wanted to make sure things were okay with legal. I know you probably couldn't get the details, but were you guys ever kind of held up by that department? Was there ever something you guys did where it was like, well, we don't know, if that works the way you guys have it?
Well, for my part, a lot of stuff would happen that was not, they didn't share it with us. And I mean, they had no incentive or reason to. So you might design abilities for a unit, and then when that unit was released, they might be a little bit different. They might have, one of your abilities might be gone, replaced with something else, or they wouldn't come to you and say, well, this was changed because of this or that. It was just they had their own internal playtesting and their own ideas about how things should be, and that's just the way it was. So, often I wasn't deep enough into the actual bureaucracy of Heroscape at the time to know how all that stuff shook out.
Okay. Was there a point where you stopped being involved with Heroscape, or did you pretty much follow it through to the end of the product's lifespan?
Well, see, that's the thing. I actually wrote that. I wrote it further along. I mean, when they went to Wizards of the Coast to do the D&D version, that was actually me doing the designing on that. And so I went over to Wizards of the Coast. I worked with the people over there on that product. And that was basically the beginning of the end of the Heroscape journey. And so I was there for every bit of it. And like I said, when I went to D&D, I was actually in charge of really, really, really designing the scenarios and all of the way that the whole D&D system worked out on that. Although the names and the miniatures that were used and those were still the same as Hasbro. They're still given to us already named and all just waiting for abilities.
Right. So
That's
so go ahead.
I wanted to say, D&D waves initially, it was a sore time period. I'm sure for a lot of people, trying to accept the change, but I've come to really enjoy the designs in D&Dscape in those three waves. Some of the best designs I personally think in all of Heroscape are in those three waves. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, Cody beat me to what I was going to say there. I know that D&D hasn't always been universally appreciated, but I really do think that there's some very strong designs there. I think, yeah, I mean, I know some of my favorites are there, even though I'm not the biggest D&D fan. I really like the way a lot of those units play. So,
well, I mean, I didn't design all of them, but I was involved in all of them, and we sort of split up the work. And it was three of us, and we split up the work between the three of us. And it was basically two. There was two main designers, and then one kind of flipped back and forth, and was sort of worked on all of it with us. So
I know that. So go ahead.
I was going to say,
regardless of the reception of it and everything, I know the quality of the units. I know what effort went into them and everything. And I'm super proud of all of that effort, especially considering the kinds of pressures that we were under to meet all these different demands. And I think that we really rose to the occasion. I think we did right by the Heroscape community. And anything that the Heroscape players would have an issue with probably has less to do with the design and more to do with just the fact that when you start to apply a kind of license on top of Heroscape, it starts to lose its specialness, because it doesn't have that same sort of charm that you get from all of the weird, funky little, the little Heroscapisms that make up the regular classic Heroscape.
So would you say that feeling mostly applies to the D&D Heroscape, or does that also apply to any other licenses you may have worked on for Heroscape?
Well, I don't think the Marvel was very well received. I think it would have been fun if they had continued it along, but obviously it got canceled. I don't think that the Magic the Gathering version of Heroscape, I don't think that it was a major success. I don't think it was a major failure either, but I just don't think that everybody responds to these different licenses imposed on top of Heroscape. I don't think they respond to those as well as just the classic Heroscape, which is sort of like the generic, battle of all time kind of stuff, and all of these goofy characters from all different genres kind of being thrown together. And there's a toy quality to it you kind of miss out when you start getting serious. Like with the D&D stuff, kind of lost that toy look to it. And so it didn't even look the same, And there was also some cheap. They went on the cheap a little bit there because they reused miniatures that had already been in circulation in the D&D world. And so even though it's a smart, I guess it's an efficient business decision, it's the Heroscapers were immediately turned off by it because they were so used to the quality and the uniqueness of classic Heroscape.
Right.
And Heroscape has always been, you look at the agents, the Matrix agents, basically what they are, or any other really character in Heroscape, and you can point to some cultural thing that this is like relating to or remaking. And I would have been I would have loved to have seen if Heroscape did like remakes of superheroes in their own taste in the flavor of Heroscape rather than just using Marvel characters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that would have been cool.
You could have Captain Numbnuts or whatever. And it's like this funny little dude, and he's like, and he does something cool, but you don't have. He's kind of like this one superhero, but he's also kind of like this other superhero, but he's uniquely Heroscape. Yeah, I get you.
Well,
Yeah, 100%.
I just gotta say, I know that Marvel wasn't always universally well received, but that Marvel really kind of got me back into the game. I picked up an ROTV set, and unfortunately, I lived in Who Cares, Pennsylvania, where Walmart's just didn't bother with expansions. So that was like really the first thing I saw past ROTV, and at the time I'd been playing. So at the time I was 13, and I'd been playing HeroClix for the last 5 years. So to me it was like, okay, cool. I get to enjoy these characters that I know so well from HeroClix. I know that's not the average experience, but I actually really liked Marvel, and I wish they'd had more opportunity to explore that.
I mean, I agree. I think that Marvel had more potential than was ever realized. And I do know from behind the scenes that there was a lot of plans for it, and those plans were really pretty cool. There's a lot of innovation that was on its way.
Can you
one thing I do?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say the one thing I do really, I found I didn't really touch my Marvel set for a long time, and then over the past couple of years, I've really enjoyed using the terrain, and I wish they would have continued down that route, if nothing else, for the cityscape. I love that stuff.
Yeah, that stuff was pretty cool.
Can you say sorry, go ahead.
I have just had way too much of it. I have tons of Marvel terrain just because when Heroscape was ended, when the Heroscape line ended at Hasbro, Craig's asked us if we wanted any of their leftover terrain and stuff, and like an idiot, I said yes, and he sent me just like a metric ton of this stuff. I could have like created houses for the homeless with all of that stuff. So,
wow. So, can you say if you were involved with any of that? Like, were you involved in the conception of any of those plans, or were you involved with Marvel development?
At that time I was a play tester for upcoming Marvel units that weren't released, and I was just part of behind the scenes, more of like a playtester. I did not design any from Marvel. I was not called upon to design anything for Marvel. But there was, our playtest group was active, and it was busy, and we were all involved in all things that were being done for Heroscape.
Now, if I can ask, of the 10 that we do know about because they were showed off at Toy Fair, was there a unit among those that you had the most fun playtesting? Do you remember?
I don't recall. I think
okay.
I remember playing. Help me here. Spawn, maybe, or not Spawn. I'm sorry, Venom. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Venom. Yeah, I really like Venom a lot.
My mind was about to be blown because Spawn is my favorite superhero. I don't remember seeing him anywhere.
I always get those mixed up for some stupid reason, but they're not even in the thing. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, I'm not a huge comic book aficionado, so that's just something that I would have relied upon other people who were more into comics than me. I would have, like, as a playtester, I'd have stress tested all of those abilities.
I suck at comic book factoids, but if I recall correctly, McFarlane, after he stopped working for Marvel and he did a bunch of the really iconic Spider-Man covers and designed Venom, he went on to make Spawn. So that's probably why you're mixing them up, I think. But
yeah, I'm getting everything mixed up on that stuff. So
no, I meant to ask, of the 10 units that we know about that weren't released for Marvel, I wondered if you remembered any of them, or if, there was one that was your favorite in particular. But I think that was, from memory.
I don't know. From my memory, I don't know what you know about what wasn't released, because there was a lot of stuff. So I don't want to go jumping in and talking about stuff that wasn't released. And
I think the photo we have has, because I'm reading this here, I know I've seen the photo, Sandman, Human Torch, Doc Ock, The Thing, Invisible Woman, Bullseye, Beast, Black Panther, Punisher, and Super Skrull.
Oh, dude, I played all of those units. I played them all. Yeah. Okay. So I do know they're my favorite. The Bullseye was my favorite, and he was my favorite. Yeah.
Very
We'll
cool.
just leave it at that.
That's awesome.
I always thought that was weird.
And
They did Bullseye, but not Daredevil.
yeah, and then they who knows? I'll just say Bullseye was my favorite, and I have my reasons, but I don't really want to go into it because I'm not
Sure.
exactly sure what I'm allowed to talk about there.
No, absolutely. Are you allowed to say whether or not you worked on the infamous Star Wars Heroscape that never saw the light of day? Like, we know it was.
I can't talk about it. I can't talk about any of that.
Okay,
Dang, that was my next question.
I didn't know if you could say if you were on the project at all, but that totally makes sense.
I can't talk about any of that.
No, I wasn't trying to pry any further. My apologies.
No, I don't blame you at all. I would want to know if I were you.
No, well, I know that even Skynet has mentioned that he isn't comfortable talking about it in detail. So I do want to ask, just kind of philosophically, from your experience working in the industry, is there kind of a taboo about speaking about these things even after the NDA has expired?
Well, I'm not afraid. Let me put it this way. I'm not afraid of Hasbro coming after me legally and
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not afraid of that. I have respect for the people that I worked with. And one thing I do know about my friend and mentor, Craig Ben Ness, is he is very, very serious about NDAs. And I would never, in my lifetime, I would never do anything to just destroy that that trust that he has in me. So even to my dying day, I'll never destroy that trust. Let me put it that way.
Oh, well, no, absolutely, and I didn't mean to suggest that you should. I meant more. Is there? I'm led to understand a lot of these NDAs aren't permanent. They have like a 10 or 15 years, sometimes at longest, longevity. And I'm not asking you to speak about this one in particular, but is there kind of a perception that even after that window it would be improper to speak about these things?
I'm not sure. I've always just played it safe, and if
Sure.
somebody puts their trust in me, then I always just live by a sort of code that I just don't want to. I just would not want to do anything. I wouldn't want to come out here and just to glorify myself or anything else to talk about stuff that I was under NDA for, because I know that it's just not proper to do, I guess. I don't know.
Sure, and I mean, even if
I'm not going to talk about it.
No,
I'm
absolutely.
not going to talk about anything like that I worked on that wasn't released in any kind of detail. I'll tell you, I love playing Bullseye. I'll tell you every reason why is because he was a low-cost unit that had like a cool ability, and I love low-cost units that do something kind of cool and interesting, and you can wedge them into any kind of army because their cost is so low, and then they have these situational impact on your battle. I love those kind of units, and so of course I love Bullseye.
And
So,
sorry, go ahead.
are you a big fan of Osamu then, I'm guessing?
I'm a big fan of pretty much any little funky low-cost unit that's high luck that you can use to leverage in situational cases when you're playing a game. I'll give you an example, like Dead-Eye Dan, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I had this army. I had a few points left over, and I didn't know what to do with them. And I had this plan for my army, but I thought, what if something's going wrong and I'm getting my butt kicked? I think I have this little few points left over. I'll buy Dead-Eye Dan, and then if it ever comes to this situation where I need that, I need to like call upon the powers of the D20, then I can just do that. I can put an order marker on him or something. And I was in a tournament and I was getting my butt kicked, and lo and behold, my last hope was to like get my Dead-Eye Dan and start doing some damage. And boom, here comes the 20. Those experiences will always be indelible in my memory. And only those little funky low-cost units with the high luck factor, those are the only ones who like really give you that sense of like crazy, swingy, fun.
Yeah.
Talk about it for the rest of your life kind of situations.
I don't have a Dead-Eye Dan story yet, but I hope to have one someday.
Jerry, do you mind if I ask? Do you happen to remember who designed the fire and water elementals for D&D?
Well, we split those up and kind of worked together on those.
Okay.
And we worked together on those and on those little, on the little baby dragons and stuff. And those are some of the funnest units that we worked on because because they're just the way that they work in the game were so neat and unique and stuff. So
Those units are what? Sorry, go ahead.
Those were all three of us. Yeah.
Those units are what convinced my wife to really give the game a shot. They're her favorite by far. She loves the elementals, so thank you for that. I had to pass that on.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So, how did you get involved with Plaid Hat? I know that Plaid Hat kind of started with a couple people from the Heroscape community, right? Like, obviously, it wasn't limited to that.
So when Heroscape started to really take off, Craig came to the established playtesters at the time and asked us if we knew anybody in the community that we trusted, that had a good mind for where we were going with Heroscape, if we had any recommendations. And I had befriended Colby on Heroscape.net. Colby was he was a graphic designer by trade, and he loved tinkering and making units for Heroscape. He was back before customs really became a thing. He was like one of the first really, really good, talented customs designers. And I was into custom designing too. And anyways, I immediately recommended Colby. And Colby, once he got inside the Hasbro system, they saw his talent, and they immediately started grooming him for bigger and better things. And as he sort of started becoming a star within the Hasbro company, I was friends with him, and so we were sort of joined at the hip as we sort of rose up in Hasbro. And when at some point, Colby designed his own game called Summoner Wars, and he pitched it to Hasbro. And Hasbro was interested in it, but for one reason or another, they just didn't pick it up. And so Colby decided that to take his proceeds from working on D&D Heroscape, he decided to peel off and start his own company and fund his own publishing of his own first game. And as soon as he got that going, and I was helping him with that, and being supportive of him in that, he realized that if he's going to have a game company, he's going to need games, and just a one-man band can't really design them and everything. So he asked me if I had any game ideas, and I had already started designing my own little dungeon crawler called Mice and Mystics. That I was actually designing it because my daughter was all into mice at the time, and we would read different books about mice and stuff, like Mice Templar and the Mouse Guard and all these little books, the Red Wall and stuff. She was all into mice, and so I thought, this would be a great idea for a little game where you could play mouse adventures and a dungeon crawl, which were still my favorite genre. And so I designed Mice and Mystics, and I told Colby about it, and he was like, "I want to publish that game." And he gave me like 6 months to come up with a solid prototype. And we arrived at Gen Con, and I showed it to him, and he immediately wanted to make the game, and he did, and we did. And so that was really right. That was, I guess, the game was published in 2012, but I'd started working on it in about 2009, I think.
So
that's
I
the
think
story.
Sorry, go ahead.
You guys fall asleep on my little story there?
No. I think I may have skipped a beat. Did Battleship Galaxies happen in between these two things?
Yes, Battleship Galaxies was weird because we got brought on as co-designers for Battleship Galaxies, and we were designing units for Battleship Galaxies, and it was going. And I can't talk about that. Battleship Galaxies stopped. They just stopped on it. They stopped working on it, and we were told to stop working on it. And then I don't know when it, like a year, 2 years later, I don't know. Just suddenly, it was on the store shelves, and all the stuff we had, or just a portion of the stuff that we had designed, was with it and everything. And I guess they had went ahead and released just the base game and none of the other stuff that we'd worked on, and they did it to maintain some sort of intellectual property thing. I think they had to do. I don't know. I can't speculate on that stuff because I'm unaware. But yes, I did do a bunch of design work on Battleship Galaxy, and so did Colby.
Interesting. Okay, I know that Craig was also involved in that, right? That was so. If
It
that
was his
almost,
design, yeah.
If that
It
was
was his
almost
design, but yeah, his game design, and then Colby and I worked on scenarios. We worked on content. We worked on units for the game, and how those units interacted, and we were very involved.
So, if you don't mind me asking, I guess this is also another question about more of game design as a profession and the industry as a whole. But did they communicate with you about the game, actually coming out after they told you to stop working on it, and then you said almost 2 years later they did eventually release that. But it sounds like it wasn't even exactly what you guys had expected it to be. Like, did they talk with you about it before crediting you, or is that even, would that have even been a reasonable expectation on your end? I know that might sound like a weird question.
When you're doing this kind of work, it's best not to have a whole lot of expectations. You just do the work that you've been told to do, that you've been hired to do, and you do it to the best of your abilities. And with regards to Battleship Galaxies, that means we get a list of ships that we get a faction, we get a list of ships that we need to work on. We create the abilities for those ships and the interactions of those abilities, and then we test them, and then we stress test them. And when I say test them and then stress test them, when I say when I'm testing units, I'm getting together with a friend and I'm testing those units against each other and stuff. But when I'm stress testing, we're talking about majorly crunching down and making sure that these units are balanced. And so all of that was what our job was. Whether they released the game or not, what they do with it after I got done doing my part of the job and get paid for it, then that's just up to them. Sometimes it's a little bit deflating when you work on stuff that you're very proud of, that you can't wait to see what the public thinks of it. You can't wait to see it out there in the greater ecosphere of competitive play. You can't wait to see it, and then it's never released. Yeah, it can be a little deflating, but that's just comes with the territory.
Gotcha. So there were some questions that we had some followers want us to ask that seem relevant to the topics that we agreed to discuss. So if you don't mind, I did want to direct some to you before we moved on to discuss Plaid Hat more.
Yeah.
So
I'm an open book.
Sure. Boromir96 asks, is Sir Hawthorne's stab in the back based on real events?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Imagine how dramatic it would have been if you said yes.
I think the actual unit and its abilities were designed before they even named it Sir Hawthorne. That name was a surprise for me and for a lot of us that were in the playtesting at the time.
Sure,
it was a surprise. I think it was a kindness on the part of Craig Van Ness and Hasbro too, to just honor me with that unit. But the name came after the abilities and after the unit was already conceived. They just decided to name it Sir Hawthorne, and they ran it through legal, and it passed. And then they're like, "Well, here's a name. We named him after you."
And that's so cool too, because I'm led to kind of understand that the culture at Hasbro, or at least at Wizards, is that they don't really want to do that anymore. Like, I know Magic, for example, used to have vanity carts, and I guess it eventually created a problem with people expecting them. So it's kind of a bummer. I wonder if that's true for Hasbro at large, but it is interesting to